what is this about? It's about like it's like a word association. Like Tim Walz is from Minnesota.
Yeah, yeah.
There's fraud. There's Somalis.
George
Jacob
Floyd. Yep.
Frey, George Floyd, and it's just like, yeah, this is the people, liberal white women everywhere. This is the place we want to go to war with, and it's kind of like crazy that this is how they make policy. Is like just like wanting to intimidate and declare war on like parts of the country. In addition to like obviously what they're doing to immigrants, and like more than half
Immigrants.
the people that
Yep.
don't have any criminal, even a charge. Like beyond that, it's just like they're also declaring war on Americans. So like this kind of this has become like the main issue for me. Like you have to disempower ICE. You have to like stop this like kind of private force that like sees itself as like the based people fighting the immigrants and the liberals. Like that can't be
Yeah.
institutionalized, and Democrats need to win, and they need to defund this thing.
Welcome, Richard. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me. Listen, some of my audience might not be familiar with some of the stuff you do, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a second. But for me, your commentary has been very useful, at least with respect to a lot of the stuff that you say with Michael Tracy on, for example, the Epstein files. I think I agree with a lot of what you guys say, but not all of it, which is interesting. And I have some thoughts about Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie that I hope we can get into. But in general, you are a conservative, or you have a background in more conservative politics. But recently, you've been sort of an iconoclast, certainly among conservatives in America, and have been highly critical of the Trump administration on some issues. Though you think that there are some issues on which he's positive, and I'm hoping that we'll get to talk about both of those sets. So why don't you introduce yourself, and thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Pisco. I think you have a, someone told me you have a smart young audience. I found that to be the case last time I was here, so I'm glad to talk. What is this hand thing? I'm sorry, I'm like a boomer. Oh, never mind. Okay, I'm like a boomer with this Discord thing.
No,
I don't
no
know much about it.
worries.
But I am on Twitter. I am on Substack, so people should subscribe to my Substack. The Substack is the highest quality stuff. Twitter is kind of trolling and fun, but also sometimes serious. I write, different kinds of op-eds. I have a monthly column in the Boston Globe. I have a monthly column in Unheard. I've written in other publications. I have two books. I have another book called Kekistocracy that's going to come out in the summer. And that's just me. There's a lot you could say about my background, but I'm
Yeah.
basically writing, and I'm on Twitter and Substack all the time, and that's where you can find me.
One thing that people have been using, which is kind of a concept that you either invented or popularized, is this notion of vice signaling. That people are now,
Mhm.
it's become part of the lexicon of referring to a lot of what the administration is doing. So first of all, why don't you explain vice signaling for the audience? And yeah, talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I don't know who came up with the term vice signaling. I doubt it was me, but somebody, it could have been me. I don't know, but like I don't recall that. But yeah, it's a term that's got around. I think I've written the definitive account of vice signaling, which is a fictionalized article called "The Based Ritual," and it's been
Yep.
cited in Politico, New York Times, like all these people who are just amazed. They're like, yeah, we see it. Like this is kind of what young conservatives are like. So virtue signaling is the idea like, oh, I'm a nice person. I care about immigrants and trans and, minorities who are being oppressed and the poor and the environment. And the rightists are kind of different. They've gone in the opposite
Yeah.
direction, like just the way they identify like as anti-left. They've gone into like vice signaling. I'm the most based. I want to crush my enemies. I think women shouldn't vote. Well, I think women should be enslaved. I want to kick out the immigrants. I want to do this to the immigrants. It's like this. And there's entire like philosophies that revolve around this. Like there's like this philosopher named Carl Schmitt who was who was pro-Nazi, but it's not maybe not fair to him that like who his modern admirers are. But Carl Schmitt basically they like him for the idea of the friend enemy distinction, the idea that like politics is just about some people dominating over others, and I think that's like a unfair caricature, but that's the idea they have. They like these like kind of reactionaries. Some of them like Alex Dugan, some of them like
Yep.
Curtis Yarvin. It's all about showing that like you're the based one. You're like one of these nice people who are soft-hearted and care about democracy and human rights. Or even not even you don't care about it. It's like you see all that stuff is fake. Right. It's like, don't you see how unfair the Democrats treat us?
Yeah.
And it's like it has this, victim mentality component to it too that I just find unbearable.
Yeah, so I watch a lot of Nick Fuentes content, and I always find that there's this kind of like a need or desire to peel back the layer and to convince the audience that like the terms by which most people are analyzing world events aren't even the right terms, that there's another layer of power perhaps behind it, and that the people are, the people who are looking at it through the lens of maybe the conception of mainstream media or the New York Times or whatever are just thinking about it the wrong way. So I have seen that. I'll let you respond to that, but then we can talk about some of the issues that I want to get into.
Yeah, I don't watch tons of Fuentes. I see the clips sometimes, but they're very funny ones. So I
Yeah.
just think, oh, this guy's really hilarious. I don't watch a lot of like to get
Did you
his,
see their get together with like Tate and they like
oh yeah,
were all,
for sure. I
yeah.
saw a lot of clips. That was funny. There's something about these guys that is just kind of hilarious. But yeah, yeah, it is. Like I think Yarvin is probably like the best example of this, who I know a little bit better as far as his
And you've
ideas.
been getting
And
into
it's
him a little bit. I've been seeing the back. You've been quoting him a little bit on some of this shit. But yeah, I've seen you talk about Curtis Yarvin. You don't really respect him
yeah,
that much anymore,
and
huh?
I mean, it's like, you scratch beneath the surface. He like believes elections are stolen by like immigrants. Like there's
Yeah.
just no, it's like a thing that there's no evidence for. And like the question is, why would someone be committed to this narrative? It's a way to vice signal, but it's like vice signaling also by saying, that the stuff you think that is morality is not real. And then that's like, because the other alternative is just like, MAGAs are the bad people, right? Like they have to be bad too, because you can't really defend Trump because Trump is just gonna like try to say he won the election no matter what, and they're gonna lie, and so it's hard to defend Trump. So you just have to say that like everyone is just that bad, and so it's I think this worldview is false. I mean, I think it's like anti-civilizational. Really, I mean, it's kind of like it's kind of like conservatives are supposed to believe like the civilization thing like matters and like it has a history and there's institutions and there's just none of
Worth
that.
protecting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of radical left wing idea, but it's the same. It's like yeah, I mean they pretend like kind of the most radical left wing people are in power, like the worst kinds of people, and they're the dominant force in society, and then that justifies them being more like them.
Yeah. Well, let's start with Epstein on speaking of virtue signaling and vice signaling, because I have a particular take on what Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie are doing, and it's a little bit conspiratorial, or I would say maybe conspiratorial, but you tell me what you think. I think that this law, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, was intentionally written to be a broad, just like basically document production request, and to contain sort of contradictory and nebulous exceptions about when that are at least initially in the hands of the Department of Justice to suss out. And also that the law does not contain a self-standing cause of action or right of suing that is put into any individual person. And the reason I think that they did this isn't because they didn't foresee some of these issues being raised, that is the invocation of exceptions or the claim that they're not complying with the law or potential litigation, but because they wanted to keep the Epstein issue a live issue. And my further evidence of this is Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna's recent decision to try to get involved in the Ghislaine Maxwell criminal trial. They filed a brief purporting to be part of the amicus brief to a criminal case that's already been resolved, and to try to invoke or convince the court to use its powers in a differently related criminal case to try to adjudicate the Department of Justice's handling of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. It seems to me that they must be aware that this kind of action has a low chance of success. And I don't think that they're stupid.
Explain to me what the amicus brief actually is doing.
The amicus brief is requesting in the criminal trial of Ghislaine Maxwell for the court,
which is still ongoing. There's still an appeal, right?
Well, the appeal went to the Supreme Court and was rejected, and there's still this there's this protective order that applies to some small clutch of documents, perhaps. But that's like there's a discrete set of legal issues that are left for the court and the SDNY to consider, and Massie and Khanna must know this, and they're claiming to have to not be seeking relief from the court by filing an amicus brief, but they are requesting the court to use its authority when it's really unclear, and the judge seems to be siding on the side that it's unclear that the court would even have this authority. The big picture, though, Richard, I want you to respond to it, and you can maybe apply your view on this Epstein issue, is that I have the view that a lot of these politicians are using the Epstein issue, maybe not because they think that there's anything that hasn't been unearthed already in terms of allegations, but to try to keep it a live issue and to needle the fuck out of Trump, even in situations in which they know Trump is going to look bad fighting this litigation no matter what, and they'll be able to claim vindication if any amount of redactions happen.
Yeah, I mean that's not a crazy. It's I don't know if that's conspiratorial. That's just political maneuvering. I don't know about Massey. I don't know if he wants Democrats to win. I think he seems motivated by spite towards Trump. But yeah, Ro Khanna wanting to keep this issue alive makes perfect sense to me. It makes perfect sense to me that they must like they probably don't think that there's like some kind of deep conspiracy going on here. There's no evidence of that. The left has never been into these kind of conspiracy theories on a like wide level. I mean that's why there was no. That's why the right was the ones who kept the
Right.
Epstein issue alive for so long. And so the idea that they want this to drag out and not necessarily get all the files in like one dump today, but like continue it for the next 2 3 years and keep this an issue. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like whether it matters, I don't know. I didn't see Trump's approval ratings go down all that much. My recollection during the Epstein thing. So like whether that's good politics or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's even though it's his worst polling issue, it seems to be like a robust set of support that he has from his base, even throughout his declining approval among independents and Democrats.
Yeah.
I'm go for it.
If they're really smart, maybe they're looking for the long term of the conservative movement, and it's like Trump being the leader can tell them not to focus too much on Epstein. But like Trump is going to be leaderless going forward, and JD
Yeah.
Vance or whoever is not going to have the same authority. So if the Epstein issue is still alive, it could potentially tear the right apart. So yeah, maybe they're thinking along that line. So that's the way I would be thinking about it.
Because I'm struggling to see other issues that tear apart the Trump coalition while Trump is in power, because everything seems to have not affected that specifically, at least with respect to the support of Trump. And so then maybe let's get into the first one: foreign interventions, right? So the foreign intervention situation, we were told during the campaign that Trump would say no new wars, et cetera, et cetera. That part of the reason to vote for Trump was to have a focus on America. Now, I think that there's an internal logic among MAGA to why these interventions are America first. At least some of them purport to do it. But some commentators among the MAGA class seem to express some hesitancy, for example, with intervention in the first intervention in Iran. Less so, I would say, much more muted response on Venezuela. I don't know what your take is on that, but talk me through first the whether or not you think this foreign stuff, that it's smart for Trump to do it, that it's a possible for it to fracture the base, and then your views on the interventions that we've seen so far, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a attitude towards foreign interventions as like a general matter. It's like they're united on Ukraine. They
Yeah.
all dislike Ukraine, all the MAGAs. Israel, I mean, it's very fascinating. There's these very, ethnocentric Jews at the top of the Trump administration. There's a lot of base energy that is very anti-Israel. So Iran is seen as kind of, fighting for Israel. So that one is tough. I think there's been, yeah, a consolidation on this. Don Monroe Doctrine, this Western Hemisphere stuff,
Yeah.
because they've done a smart thing. I mean, and there's a New York Times article about the run up to the Venezuela, the run up to the Venezuela incursion, where basically Stephen Miller and like Marco Rubio ended up like selling it away to Trump. Like Rubio has his own thing; he wants to see Venezuela and democracy. Stephen Miller just wants to like use force against people who
Yeah.
ship drugs into the country and like have an excuse to invoke the
Alien
Aliens
Enemies
Enemies
Act
Act.
and other stuff. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so you need like the foreign intervention helps you like enforce immigration law like more strictly. So and plus it seems a big success. I mean, the U.S. goes in there, blows everything, it just takes him and it gets out.
Yep.
Gets its result. So the success aspect then like kind of the ties to the other things that right wingers care about, like drugs and the border, and just kind of being able to feel dominant. There's no
Communism.
like
Yep.
fighting Israel's war. Yeah, the socialism. There's no fighting Israel's war or anything like that. Yeah, I think there, some people like Tucker, just like the real misanthropes who just hate America and hate the world, are going to still be upset. But yeah, everyone else is basically on board with this thing.
Yeah, I think that that's a right assessment of where the temperature is there, and I think that it's also a right assessment of the kind of interventions that Trump likes to do, in and out. No casualties. Let's maybe not get bogged down. But you aren't bound by the rationale of Trump, of Rubio, of any of these people at the, what did you say, ethnocentric Jews at the start, at the top of the administration. So tell us why you,
Correct term, but people
well,
who
yeah.
care a lot about Israel.
Why do you support the Venezuela intervention? I can tell you why I don't support it, but if you want to start, you can do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that America has a responsibility to do good things in the world. I think that one of the worst things in the world is when socialist dictators come to power, and especially ones that are particularly bad, like Maduro was, who just crashed the economy, like really destroyed his country. And look, I mean, we took this guy out for a relatively small cost. Like the next person, Delcy Rodriguez, is like you never know, like sometimes the successor is better than the guy, because if you imagine socialist dictators on like a scale of like 1 to 10,
Right.
Maduro is like a 7 8, like one of the worst people you can imagine. If Delcy Rodriguez is just a normal socialist dictator, that will be better for Venezuela, that'll be better for America, that'll be better for the region. And so like what's the cost here? No American lives, thankfully. Not that expensive. It was in and out. We're not nation building. We're not risking war with a nuclear power like you might think in like Taiwan or something
China or
like
something.
that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, why not do this? There's, there's like certain, there's certain arguments about like international law, which I don't believe is completely, fake or useless. At the same time, like the idea that you don't invade countries is already pretty weak as a norm. Like it's not gonna like I think change Putin's behavior because we went in
Oh
and we
yeah,
seized
that
Venezuela.
stuff I think that's all bullshit, right? The notion that like
Okay.
America does it, so Russia's going to do it, China's
Yeah.
going to do it
You
if they
can
want to do it.
tell me why you oppose it then.
Yeah. So the first and principal reason is I think it's unlawful under U.S. law, and because I think it's unlawful under U.S. law, I'm going to need a really, really, really good reason to think that Trump should violate the Constitution. That's number one. And then number two, it's the people in charge doing what I think is an unconstitutional act. That is to say, the very same Stephen Miller reaction that you provided, I think absolutely is present. And I am not going to say that I support Trump even having like a better grounding to invoke authorities within the country on the basis of an emergency like the one that he causes. And so, based on the personnel there, I think that the likely result is going to be a further authoritarian impulse from Trump, where the courts might even give him more leeway in that respect after what I think is an illegal act to invoke things like the Alien Enemies Act to deploy people within the United States based on a more justifiable now condition of war, at least a purported invasion that occurred. And then finally, because I don't think that the administration is dedicated towards long-term efforts and pursuits in improving the condition in Venezuela, I just have no intuition about what will be the response there, absent some kind of commitment to impose democracy or to coerce for the purpose of liberalizing that abject authoritarian regime. And so I have no reason to think that Delcy Rodriguez is going to be better or worse. Now you have a kind of intuition about, well, it's a 7. If you just roll the dice on average, it's going to be better. But I don't know that it won't cause like a power vacuum or insecurity in which, maybe the expectations of the Venezuelan people are that there would be a fundamental change and we're only to a 5. And that might cause like internal collapse and horrible situations, or the military really cracking down in ways that are horrible. And so because of those reasons, because I don't have a strong intuition that this will lead to better results for the Venezuelan people, because I think that the administration will use things like this to justify greater authoritarian grabs, and because fundamentally I think it violates the Constitution, I'm against it, man.
Okay, yeah, we could take those in turn. Yeah,
Yeah.
the legal aspect. There's been to law school. I think you've been to law school too. The idea that the Congress declares war. I mean, we're way beyond that, right? I mean, and so like sometimes I think you just have to accept that the Constitution's changed and practices have changed. There's just it's like being like, oh, I don't like Social Security. There's an unconstitutional case for it. Well, you know what? FDR eventually won. The courts eventually ruled that the New Deal and these other things were constitutional. I still the words of the Constitution didn't stay change. I think it's hard to find like a textualistic interpretation
Right.
for like
Yeah.
Medicare and Social Security, but we live with it. And so it's like that kind of with foreign policy. I think there's just accepted practice now, and you have to be a kind of a living constitutionalist to a certain extent. It's like not going to win anyone over to say, well, this is illegal. Like, okay, but like every president has done this,
We
and every
wouldn't
president.
treat this with any other right, would I mean? I know this is a powers question, not necessarily a right question, and so is the one that you provided on Social Security, not necessarily implicating a right. It's more of a powers question. But I'm just not sure why, in the context in which the Supreme Court is striking down as unconstitutional exertions of legislative authority. For example, the criminal case against Trump, you can't do that. Striking down these protections for certain for-cause removal positions. The Supreme Court seems to be actively sort of measuring different assumed things that was part of our constitutional structure. It was assumed that you could order the FTC to have protections from removal. It was assumed that the Federal Reserve would be protected. It was assumed that you could charge a former president with a crime. And so in a situation in which so much what was assumed constitutional practice seems up for grabs, I don't have a reason to believe that it makes sense for us to take this as the situation to ignore if we're reassessing a bunch of other stuff. And especially not in this case. This is the perfect situation in which this is exactly why we're concerned of the president having total power over the war, is because if we have a president who is going to use a state of war or an undeclared state of war or an ambiguity to, I don't know, for example, deploy the military into American cities on pretexts, I think this is precisely the right stand to take to reassert that proper constitutional role for Congress.
Yeah, I mean, this idea about removal and independent agencies and these, the foreign policy kind of the powers inherent, arguably, to the executive. I mean, a lot of conservatives have supported the idea that basically there's nothing unconstitutional about the president using force. Congress still has to approve funding for stuff, and they can still act if they want to, but they have to become they have to kind of overrule what the president is doing. And Congress has been happy to advocate their role here. They've just haven't wanted to deal with it, and so all the actors in the system don't want to go back to the system, don't want to return to a system where Congress declares war. That's the only time we use force. It's like something we can complain about, but I think it's like a kind of a theoretical thing. It's fine if you say that's a reason for you to oppose the. But you
don't disagree with my reading of the Constitution. You just think that it's kind of at this point the practice. Because I agree that if this is the rule going back, then Clinton would have violated it. Then Obama would have violated it with certain interventions. And other presidents.
I don't. In this case, is a little more complicated because it's like they didn't recognize the U.S. stopped recognizing Maduro, and they didn't declare war on Venezuela, or they didn't.
It was like a law enforcement action. But
so it's
like
the
military
whatever they went into. Yeah. I mean, if didn't they recognize? Who did they recognize that was a president? Was it Guaido, or do they not recognize him? Yeah. So they could have just asked him, and they'd be like, okay, this is like a guy asking us to help him with, he's that's obviously not real, but it's like it's like these kind of technicalities. Anyways, but we could get to the other stuff. Okay. The idea of
assume it's legal. Now the results, right? So now we're going to go with the put that aside. Now think about the idea that
Trump will use it for authoritarian ends. Yes, we did see that. I mean, with the Aliens Enemies Act, it didn't. That was before the Maduro raid, right? Sure. So there is they're already doing this, and the extent of what they're doing on immigration, there's a lot of things that are frightening that they're doing on immigration. It doesn't seem in general tied to what's going on in Venezuela right now, with the exception of specifically Venezuela. Yeah, they're going to do this no matter what. I think we need to fight them, but stopping Trump from taking Maduro because that's going to make his life harder. I don't think that's going to be the case because he'll still say they're alien enemies and they're still going to fight that in court. That's all. That's still been part of the issue.
You don't think the courts would be more in a situation in which we're to decide whether regular people or the administration will try things? I'm concerned about the courts and, strictly speaking, the Supreme Court. That if Trump starts doing these kinds of actions,
if we were invaded Venezuela like Iraq, maybe, but this thing happened, so it's it happened, and it's. I think the legal arguments are going to be the same from before the Maduro raid and after. And then finally, the Venezuela thing, which I think is the big one because I think it's gonna influence Venezuela in the future, that country, a lot more than America. You're right. It is unpredictable. Venezuela does have internal politics. They did have an election, last year, and Maduro lost by
agreed.
We know this through various methods, yes. And so they have internal politics, and the question is okay, you've given one scenario, maybe they become even more authoritarian. The other scenario is maybe they become less authoritarian because it is again a regression towards the mean kind of thing, where Venezuela has always been more democratic than this, and most socialist dictators have been much better than this. And sometimes there's just a kind of effect where like one person is like unable to deliver change because they're so kind of defined by the previous policy. And so just having a change from Delcy Rodriguez to from Maduro to Delcy Rodriguez, just it's kind of something that you would think that would change things. Now, there's been some good articles I've read in the New York Times and elsewhere about how Delcy Rodriguez actually had some, pro-market reforms in the last few years that helped stabilize the Venezuelan economy. So it's like you have to be like really crazy or really incompetent or like really stupid to actually believe that like the Maduro, the Chavismo, that stuff is like the right way to run a country.
Oh, I totally get that. Yeah.
And there's for all we know, I mean, this woman is smart and capable, and at least realizes that, and it's going to be power self-interested. But keep in mind, I mean, I really oppose this idea that like when Congress was voting on like tying Trump's head, like maybe it just gets more democratic and more pro-market and less socialist, just because the U.S. is sitting there, and if you displease us too much and you piss off Marco Rubio or Trump, like the same thing's going to happen to you, right? Like that itself is like an incentive for any future leader to behave in a way that was different from the Maduro regime.
So in general, you don't have a problem with them doing this because of the incentive structure. But what does it say about our allies like Denmark? I mean, in Greenland. Now we can say that they made a deal and everything's going to be okay or whatever. But I think that there are externalities here and a potential that people are pricing in the fact that the Trump effect can't last. Is JD Vance going to be able to, for example, let's say that Trump is out of office. Well, I guess the first question I ask is, do you think the same principle for Delcy Rodriguez applies to JD Vance, that if Trump is out of office, you would prefer JD Vance as president, wouldn't you?
Me to Trump?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
JD Vance is pretty bad.
All right. But put that aside. Do you think anyone but Trump is going to be able to maintain this sort of incentive structure?
Not that necessarily incentive structured. Other leaders are not going to be as credible as far as taking a military force, but who knows? Like maybe Vance is. I think that. So I mean, first of all, we have 3 more years, so like a lot could change in 3 years. Sure. I mean, they can coerce Delcy Rodriguez doing all kinds of reforms, having elections, things that could really get out ahead. There's going to be pressure within Congress too. Like there's a Florida caucus and like a Hispanic caucus and Cubans and people like that who care a lot about democracy in Venezuela, and they're going to pressure, Democratic administration. They're going to pressure Republican administration. The South people in South Florida were part of the reason that Trump took a hard line. Those in Congress that was behind because they would vote along with the big beautiful bill. They wanted them to take a hard line on Maduro. So those people will still be there. So America will still have some pressures, even if it won't be like people think Trump is a little less. Trump is more crazy, and so maybe he's more likely to use force. Maybe they don't think that, but still. America has a lot of pressure that it can put forward under any president. The other thing you mentioned, the Greenland thing.
Yeah.
I actually was, I like the idea of taking Greenland, but not by force. I like the idea of trying to do like, a real big PR campaign. I think that now that it I think that we shouldn't do it now. I agree with you, kind of like some of these concerns about like Trump just getting his head big and like having successes and like just resorting to force in the international arena with allies. But like I don't think that's inherent to the Maduro thing. Like, George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan like intervened in Latin America. Nobody thought they would invade Greenland or they would invade Europe, right?
Yeah, but Trump is different. He's going to think he's invincible. And especially,
but we know he's crazy. Yeah. He's like, it's fascinating to watch him back down on the Greenland thing because the stock market, I think, went down like 2% in one day over this stuff. Next day, he says, I'm not going to use force. And it goes back up, right? I don't know if it fully regained or whatever, but he does this all the time. So, like, he's not that crazy. Like, he is crazy, but like he's still guided by the markets and like political instincts. Like that's clear by now. We saw this with the
same New York Times articles, Richard. I have to stop because those articles say that he was like pissed off that Maduro was dancing, and that like he felt that Maduro wasn't treating him with respect, and that at least part of the rationale might have been him sort of like feeling so safe. At least that's what I read in the New York Times.
Yeah, I mean there is. Yeah, I mean I saw that too. But it's still consistent with Trump. Like he gets his revenge and then he like adjusts. right? Like these things, like he, tries to arrest Kobe. The big things that are going to like really wreck the system, which would be reflected in like the stock market and the economy. He shies away from that stuff, and he shies away from that stuff because of the political backlash. And so, like, if the American people were really, they are against immigration, what he's doing on immigration, but if it was like so overwhelming, right? If it was like 80% or something like that, if there's the abortion thing where he's just completely shut it down and said your administration's not going to do anything about this. Like he pays attention to political incentives. Like kind of crazy when people think he doesn't, because like you don't dominate one political party for a decade coming from an outsider without being very, very good at politics. And being good at politics is also like not doing things that are that crazy. Unquestionably, he's kind of crazy. Unquestionably, he's like unstable, but he's unstable within this thing where like he's going to maintain that like base of support and that 35%, at least 40% approval rating.
But I think that he's gonna keep those guys no matter what he does. I mean, we could have a Epstein release document that shows that without a doubt Trump like absolutely assaulted a 14-year-old.
He's very sensitive to like just a slight, like if the stock market really went south, like we don't know, like we've never seen it happen under George W. Bush. George Bush at the end when Iraq was spinning out of control, and then the Great Recession. I think his approval rating was like 20%, and we've never seen that Trump anywhere close to that. Now, part of it's like there's never been a crisis, but also like Bush doubling down in Iraq and taking a lot of casualties was something he did because he just wanted to do it. He thought it was like important at that point in time. And
he's on a second term. Trump's on his second term. He's old.
Yeah, you're right on that. Maybe it's a second term. Maybe it's just he's now at the end, and now the real crazy comes out, and he does what he wants to do. Yeah, but he's not motivated by like policy goals. That's the other thing too. He's motivated by like his own ego, and so like that.
And that's my concern on the internet intervention stuff is
and the international. Yes, he'll just invade Greenland because that's all he cares about. Yeah, you're right. It's possible.
But I understand. I think that there is a way you could sell me on this Venezuela intervention. I think for me, you would, as a certain assumption, for it need to be legal on my lights. But you could sell me that, and you could sell me if there was an actual dedication to supporting, for example, the opposition or to announcing elections. They haven't even like stated that as a goal, right? The goal still is, or at least the stated goal is, and we can see past that, right? We can see past that and be like, okay, they're obviously lying. Fine, but I think that has other implications. It's drug interdiction. It's narco terrorism, and this stuff clearly isn't what's motivating the administration when it comes to cocaine. America doesn't really have a cocaine problem, even if there are a few or whatever number of like trace fentanyl deaths a year. That's not what's motivating them. And my fear is that in order to trust that the administration will accomplish aims that we think that they're moving towards, we have to both trust, I think, the competency and the kind of like internal process by which information is distributed, and that they're not just holding Trump in like sort of an isolation chamber and like not showing him polls, not showing him this or that. And so I don't trust the process behind the decisions. It seems like he talks to Netanyahu or he talks to Rubio and he decides to do something, and then the next day he decides something else, and he's very changeable. There are some constants. I will agree with you. There are some constants that he won't touch or that he will always go down. But he just seems like a very capricious figure, and it also like a more fragile figure from a physiological perspective. So I'll let you interact with that, and then we can move on to other issues.
No, you won't get any question from me as far as that. I think that on Trump's personality, but like I do think Rubio is a kind of stabilizing force here. I think they have a team around him. There are people who, even if Trump is crazy, there are people who like specialize or take on portfolios. Like I think the immigration thing, even though I don't like what's going on, it has a kind of coherence to it. I think Stephen Miller is running it. He has his people in DHS, and he has his people in his White House. So parts of foreign policy could be like that too. It doesn't all depend on Trump being mentally stable or having good information sources or whatever.
I totally agree that there are some parts of how the federal government is working that have like an internal logic, and it's so clear that there's like a rational set of motivations that are pushing for policies. And I think that is most clear on immigration, most clear on border. That stuff seems very deliberate and very sort of purposeful in their different actions. But on international relations generally, It feels like every week, and you can tell me what you think about this. It's like new deal with Ukraine. Russia needs to give up all the land. Actually, Ukraine needs to get what it gets, and actually, we're not going to stop the funding. Oh, it's going to be on. It's or the same thing with like Israel, Gaza. It feels like that they're everything's on the table for Iran. We'll strike Iran. It was the greatest peace. It's peace. It doesn't seem. I think that there are actors within the Defense Department under Hegseth and JD Vance. I think has his hands on some of this as well, and certainly Rubio, that have coherent goals. It just doesn't seem like Trump is pushing with a uniform vision. It feels like there are competing visions within his administration that are constantly vying for power. It doesn't seem like everyone's on the same side.
Yeah, I mean that's right. I think that Vance is probably like I think that the Venezuelan specialists. I think that the Venezuelan portfolio goes to the people who care about it the most. The immigration portfolio goes to the people
Miller,
who care
yeah.
about it. Seems like the same thing with Israel. The Israel portfolio. Kushner and like Witkoff. The Ukraine thing is kind of up in the air because nobody like makes Ukraine their number one issue. They just kind of there's kind of these competing forces. So yeah, I mean that suggests that like it's not going to be like too many heads in the pot. Like I don't think like JD Vance is going to try to do one thing on Ukraine and like Rubio Hegseth is going to do another.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the Rubio people that are in control. Rubio is probably going to take whatever ideas he has to Trump. Rubio will probably talk to Miller and like make sure like they're on the same page as like there's some anti-immigration angle, and then they can like dominate the Western Hemisphere, and the policy will be the policy. I don't think it'll necessarily be a disaster if you don't trust Trump.
Okay, this is the moment of truth, Richard. Grade the foreign policy of the first term so far for Trump, where after a year, you're liking what you're seeing.
It's kind of all over the place. Like I think the idea of Gaza, like, is correct. Like they should care more about making money and less about like their land, like and whatever these other issues, these like kind of religious issues. And so like what they're doing with like the
Wait,
peace
you
board,
mean
I think
the people of Gaza, or you mean the administration?
the people of Gaza.
Okay.
That was the world community and the people of Gaza. And I think the Trump administration, like when they say, when Jared Kushner says, we're going to build like hotels or whatever, like people should be happy about. Like I hate this stuff where it's like, no, they should just be like throwing their fists in the air and saying, we're going to fight Israelis to the last man. Like I think that's, I think that's kind of a more healthy attitude. So I think they've taken.
Is that a bit of a straw man though, Richard? Because isn't the contention that it's up to the people of Gaza to decide what they want to do with their land?
If it was up to the people of Gaza, you would give the people of Gaza the choice to leave Gaza. You would give them that choice, and then if all the people stayed in Gaza, well, that would be something else. And a lot of the people who dislike what the administration is doing don't want to give them that option. They call it ethnic cleansing. When I look at it as they are getting the choice of to leave or not, like every other group in the world that is involved in some kind of conflict. So I think like the Middle East is obviously a very tough situation, but generally genuinely oriented in the right direction. The Venezuela thing I like, and then the.
Can I just pause there right now, because like you're appealing to the sensibilities of what's in the best interest of the Venezuelan people in the context of Venezuela, and it seems like in Gaza, maybe you are as well in saying that I think it would be better for the Gazan people to accept the Hotel Riviera or whatever the plan is that Kushner et al. Have in Gaza. But is the primary motivation, or your primary like sort of assessment, motivated by what's in the best interest of the Gazan people, or what's in the best interest geostrategically for Israel and the United States?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, I think that for the Gazan people, like you're not doing them any favors for trapping them in this situation. And you should try to have you should try to rebuild. The best interest of Gaza is not for Hamas to be in power. And like, it's not like people have a choice. It's not like people can vote today. Maybe they would vote for Hamas, but like, they don't really have that option. That's not something that, is going on. And then
but where are you going to put them, Richard? Where are you going to put them?
The Palestinians, they could be. I mean, like they could be. They could be. If Gaza, Israel had no designs on Gaza as far as like settlements or anything like that. They left Gaza, and if the whoever was running Gaza after that period in 2006 had given a thing where like, we want to just be left alone to have international investment and we'll stop fighting Israel. Like Israel would have loved to take that deal, and the U.S. would have loved to take the deal. It's the problem. It's the problem of Hamas. There's a broader Palestinian issue with like the West Bank, but like if you're actually worried about Gaza, like you could solve Gaza. You could solve Gaza. If like these, the incentives were lined up. If whatever, if it
You don't
wasn't
think
these.
the Israeli government has designs on land acquisitions in Gaza or indeed the West Bank?
Well, at this point, yeah, yeah, it seems like it, but it wasn't that before October 7th. It wasn't about controlling the land in Gaza, um, and so yeah, and so like what it's like best. I care about American interests. I care about Israeli interests. I care about the Palestinians.
Got it.
I think that like the Trump administration is directionally in the going in the right direction. Venezuela thing I like, but then you have that along with the
The tariffs is
the
technically
crazy stuff.
I think the
Tariffs.
tariff is interacts with international relations sufficient for you
Yeah,
to include it on the foreign policy. It's also domestic, but yeah.
of
So
course. Yeah, Trump uses it as a tool of foreign
right,
policy, and
right.
it's connected to every other thing he wants to do, like Greenland. I think we've like done some bad things with our allies. At the same time, maybe it's like waking them up a little bit to take responsibility. I think they're probably spending more on defense than they were before, thanks to the Trump effect.
You
But
mean
yeah,
NATO?
it's just like kind of yeah, NATO, the kind of like the vibe of it. The vibe of it is not very good, right? The vibe of it is like international relations is a lot
Kind of
about
dark and
vibes.
shit. So what's the grade? What's the
Yeah,
grade, Richard?
I don't know. Maybe the grade is like I don't know a B. I don't know, B minus. I
Okay.
like the Maduro thing. I think that European relationship will probably recover. I think they're, I think that yeah, that's probably like the best field of the administration. Maybe there's some other things too, but yeah, that's up there.
No, that's great. I love that discussion. And yeah, obviously, I think that different foreign policy situations you can assess differently. I didn't hear your view on the Ukraine Russia situation. Do you support the administration's? I don't want to know. I don't know what to call it. An ambiguous slash definitely more negative to Ukraine than the Biden administration was. I think you can agree with that. But do you support their
Yeah,
policy in Ukraine?
no, I think they're too friendly to Russia. I think that Ukraine is, something we should support morally, and just because, I think that the Russians believe that they have a White House that's indifferent to the Ukrainian cause, and they believe that they can keep pushing. Right?
Yeah.
I think that that's the case, and like Europe and America have to be united.
Okay.
Because Russian ambitions, like I was one of these people. I thought we should have taken NATO off the table at the before the Russian invasion. Like, why was it still on the table? Like, try at least try
Wasn't that deal on
to.
offer with Russia? I thought I read reporting that they had offered it.
No, no. Well, maybe you've seen some other reporting, but
Okay.
from my understanding, is they didn't. And I listened to some interview on this podcast called "War on the Rocks," where they talked to somebody pretty high up in the Biden administration, was saying like, "No, no, we couldn't do that. We could never make that offer." And so,
So you believe that
yeah,
the
it's.
NATO expansion was actually what's motivating the Russian invasion? Seems hard
I
to
think
believe for
it's like
me.
complicated. It's complicated how these people's brains, people like Putin's brains work. But like, yeah, I mean, I think it did create the right pretext. Now, I think it's kind of insane to think that like Ukraine was going to invade Russia or something like that. But I think it's cultural. I think it was the idea that like Ukraine is going to be part of the West, and like this thing called Russia, which is like this great civilization, which has Kiev as like the such a historic and important part of like the foundation of their
Right. Yeah.
civilization, that was just going to go to the West. And so NATO was part of that. Part of that was like Ukraine internally, like going after like Russian language media, and like not wanting Russia to have, I think justifiably, but not wanting Russia to have influence in the country. And so yeah, it was kind of this thing of like civilizational loss, I think, was kind of the idea. And NATO, like an official like partnership with NATO, was like part of that idea.
I
And
get
now,
that that's the pretext, but it kind of feels like the attitude that you're describing as a revanchist kind of
oh, it
revival,
is.
tying back to history kind of deal. And the NATO thing
Yeah,
is
yeah.
just like the kind of like pretext for the broader ideological purpose of the invasion.
I think it's symbolic. I think it's symbolic of like what they think was happening to Ukraine, and just the idea that it was going to orient towards the West and not be a friend of Russia anymore. And so, yeah, I don't think, maybe they felt like Ukraine would like be a launching pad to invade Russia. Like maybe that'd be crazy to think that, but maybe they don't think that. They think rather, I think they believe that Ukraine has value as part of Russian civilization. And Putin did this like, there was this international meeting around like 2008. He's like, no, no, you'll never get Ukraine. Like it was just like there was
Yeah,
something about Ukraine that was different from Poland or the Baltics. It was just seen as part
agreed
of
on that.
Russian civilization.
That,
And
that,
so
that seems correct. Yep.
what can you do? Like, what could you have done before the war? You could have tried to reassure them. Like, it's not the best thing for Ukraine if Russia would leave it. It's like a crazy, ex-boyfriend or something that's gonna like if it gets its life together, it's gonna go and like destroy it. Like, you could have just like said Ukraine, you're gonna be neutral. Like Putin's going to have a say in the future of your country. Ukrainians wouldn't want that. Um, that sucks. But like, I think that could have probably stopped an invasion. We'll never know. But that's uh,
Here's my
that's
position on that, and then we can move into domestic stuff because I really want to get into Renee Good, ICE, and that shit because I've seen you on Renee Good, and I want to talk about that stuff. So my final sort of statement on the Russia stuff is, I really do think that it was motivated by territorial ambitions, but if I was convinced that NATO for non-invasion were on the table and it would actually prevent a future incursion invasion, I'd take that deal. In fact,
yeah.
if I knew that segmenting or I should say freezing the lines of conflict right now in exchange for no war would permanently end the conflict, at least in the foreseeable future, next 50, 60, 70 years, I'd take that deal too. The problem is you can't trust Putin or the Russian government.
Yeah.
And so to the
I
extent
think
that there's a
that's
deal to be made, there's just no buy-in, right? There's no trust that they're going to enforce the deal or that America is going to put up its end of the bargain. And so why should or why could or how could it be possible for Ukraine to agree even to a bad deal if there's no trust that Russians are even going to follow a bad deal?
Yeah, I mean, there's two separate questions of before the invasion, which I think, there like Putin has done crazy things and he's invaded, Georgia and stuff like that, but it was never something on this scale, which is like I was going to take and swallow a whole country. Like it would have been worth trying to find a way to not. And but I think that like his appetite has been whetted a little bit, and
Yeah,
because so much blood and treasure have been sacrificed, like this is his legacy. He's got to make sure it's got to be worth it. So just like stopping right now is probably not enough. He probably wants
yeah,
all
I
of
agree.
Ukraine. I agree with that. Like maybe before he would have taken like just like a kind of Finlandization kind of thing. I don't think he would even. Maybe he would take that Finlandization, but like there's no way to get that without military domination because the Ukrainians are not gonna go for it.
But
And
that's why I don't
so
understand Michael Tracy, your friend's position, where it's kind of like, why don't they have a deal? Why don't they have a deal? Why don't they have a deal? Like, there is no deal that is reliable that the Russians will accept that isn't going to be violated in 2 years for
you
greater.
ever have Michael Tracy on? Have you had him on the
Yeah,
show
yeah. We,
before?
we, we talked about Epstein stuff. We haven't talked about Ukraine before, but that is what I like. I fundamentally think that Michael Tracy is missing is not that
He
there's
when I talk to him, yeah, when I talk to him, he seems not to want to take like direct positions like that. He
yeah.
seems to like to say, "Oh, this kind of thing is hypocritical," or "This doesn't
Yes,
make sense what they're
yes,
doing."
true.
I rarely see Tracy saying like, "We should have this deal." So yeah, I'd be interested if you talk to him next time. Maybe you ask him directly.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. On to domestic stuff. Let's first talk about Renee Good. What's your take?
Yeah, I think the guy killed her. I mean, I think it was like, I watched the video, the New York Times one, um, especially the second and third shot. And some people will be like, oh, you don't know what it's like to be in this situation. Like, okay. What kind of gets me is like, it doesn't stop he shoots her, it doesn't stop the car, right?
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
why is he
No,
shooting? Why is he shooting
that
her?
is the thing is people will only analyze the threat or the risk, but it's not just an analysis of the risk. It's the use of force in relation to the risk. So of course, there can be situations in which even assuming that there was a threat of serious bodily injury sufficient for you to use force, the force you use needs to have some logical connection to preventing the qualifying threat. And as you point out, how does shooting her at that distance from the car have any tendency to lower that threat?
Yeah. And even like, all the law enforcement people say you don't get in front of a car. And like it's kind of weird. He's like, even not even just in front of the car, but like to the side where it's like
Yeah.
she could try to drive off. It's like the worst possible. Like if he was just in front of the car, she probably wouldn't drive off, right? He was like right almost there. And he's giving her room to get away and then shoots her when she does. It's bad. I think it's like it is really bad that the administration lies this much. That they're never going to prosecute this. They'll never cooperate with any local local jurisdiction that's trying to investigate it. Minnesota in this case. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I think that the whole Somali. I wrote an article about this about Renee Good and George Floyd and kind of Minnesota being the center of our national politics again. Yeah, there is no like this is not like a logical thing like why Minnesota because the Somalis and like 90% of them have some kind of legal status. It was in response to Nick Shirley. I mean,
Yeah,
this guy
talk
was
about
just
Shirley. This guy's a fucking idiot.
he's brain damaged. I mean, he really comes across as like you wouldn't like if this kid was in your like college class or something, you wouldn't think that you'd think this is one of the dimmer kids
Yeah.
in the class, and they're praising him as like the greatest journalist of
Reporter,
our
he
generation.
uncovered this massive fraud.
Whatever, even like the Somali fraud, which there's some Somali fraud, has nothing to do with illegal immigration.
Yeah.
It's not about illegal immigration, and Minnesota has, I think about half the rate of illegal immigrants as the national average, and so it's one of the last places you would go. There are some things with like not local jails not cooperating with law enforcement, but still, like a lot of places do that. And so, like, what is this about? It's about like it's like a word association. Like Tim Walz is from Minnesota.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's fraud. There's Somalis.
George
Jacob
Floyd. Yeah.
Frey. George Floyd, and it's just like, yeah, this is the people, liberal white women everywhere. This is the place we want to go to war with, and it's kind of like crazy that this is how they make policy. Is like just like wanting to intimidate and declare war on like parts of the country, in addition to like obviously what they're doing to immigrants, and like more than half
Immigrants.
the people that
Yep.
don't have any criminal even a charge. Like beyond that, it's just like they're also declaring war on Americans. So like this kind of this has become like the main issue for me. Like you have to disempower ICE. You have to like stop this kind of private force that like sees itself as like the based people fighting the immigrants and the liberals. Like
Uh,
that can't be
yeah.
institutionalized, and Democrats need to win, and they need to defund this thing.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm with you there. It does seem though that I don't know if you saw there was a recent Ezra Klein interview with some conservative writer. I'm forgetting his name now, and he described why, in his estimation, a lot of what Trump is doing isn't going to be long lasting or something to that effect. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
But
you've all lived.
yes, yeah. And he, I think, even if you don't grant that, and I don't fully grant that, although it's probably more lasting with immigration than anything else, I will say that his description of how the administration operates, that is to create sort of like individual deals to coerce action more broadly. I think that that's largely correct, and it's not just in the issue of immigration, ICE, but it's for like universities, it's for broadcasters, it's for media pundits, in all these areas. They'll pick a couple cases, take Mahmoud Khalil, take suing CNN, take any one of those different Jimmy Kimmel, et cetera, and they'll not necessarily institute a policy that is like easily identifiable to always do this or to have a different standard, although sometimes they do that, but just to scare and coerce people into compliance. And I think nowhere is that better exemplified than in ICE and their deployments with ICE and the National Guard. I mean, in those situations, they're really there was a finding out of a district court. There's an administrative stay on the ruling right now, but literally found that the deployment of tear gas, some seizures were done for the specific purpose of retaliation against First Amendment protected activities. It's happening everywhere, and it's causing the approval rating on what should be one of Trump's strongest issues, immigration, to go down. So talk to me about that, the public perception. Is this becoming a losing issue for him? And what do you feel about, regardless of whether ICE should be defunded, what is the political strategy here?
Yeah, so this Yuval Levin thing, yeah, I mean, there's an argument there. He says that the Trump has signed less legislation.
Yeah.
They've done less regulatory change, and that's I'm sure that's true. But at the same time, this kind of like it's kind of more It's kind of bigger than making policy change because like the
Yeah,
way the government functions has kind of changed. And
bingo.
I think every Republican from now on is going to behave like this. Maybe Democrats will behave like this too, but at least every Republican, at least Republicans know that their side doesn't care at all. And so like individual deal making and trying to like, use government to force it in a certain direction, that's going to be like, deal making with companies, like that's going to be like kind of
The norm.
the norm. Now, maybe Trump is just unique and he can do unique things, and other people can't. And maybe it just goes back to like it's just a weird thing, and then like politics just becomes normal again after Trump. Like I don't think that that's like impossible. But I think that like Republican politicians at least have learned that they can get away with a lot. Now maybe they can get away with a lot if they're not Trump. That's the other thing. Like Congress has been like when Congress wants to push back, when the Senate wants to say we're not going to confirm Matt Gaetz, like Matt Gaetz goes away, right? But then they confirm RFK, and so RFK gets in.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's just like Trump is so intimidating to them, like any other Republican president, and then you have Congress and the Senate, and they're a little bit more responsible actors going forward. So yeah, it's yet to be seen. Like he has fundamentally changed like our government system to make something authoritarianism. He has institutionalized that. Thank God for term limits. I think he's probably not going to run again. And then what comes next?
Hey,
I don't know,
Richard,
because back to normal.
you're cutting out a little bit. Why don't you try exiting the call real quick and rejoining it to see if that fixes it?
Okay.
Because
Okay,
all right,
is this better?
Yeah, way better, way better. Thank you. So we had just said, you said basically that on some issues the senators are willing, and his party is willing to buck it, and maybe it's the fact that his power is so unique, and that his hold over it is so unique that really no one else might have that potential. And I somewhat buy that. I do think that he has a unique hold in some respects, and but I think you're correct that the issue isn't like the policies themselves; it's about the very nature of authority and the structure and the realization that the base doesn't really give a shit about those limitations or structures, and that we're a little bit naive to think that they ever did. They will push back on some things. They push back on the Fed. They push back on or on the Epstein file stuff. And on Matt Gaetz. What is the through line on when the Republicans stand up? Are they pet issues, or are they issues where they feel like there's more security there? Talk to me about that.
Well, the people who push back on the Fed thing are completely different from the people who push back on Epstein, right? So there's these kind of different poles, right? It's like a Senate versus House thing to some extent. It's the the responsible people who want the institutions to function. They know the Fed is a big deal, and then the other side you have the Epstein people who are just crazy conspiracy theorists. The thing is like the coalition changes when Trump is gone too. It's like a lot of the people who like Trump like are really aggressive people who just like are on social media all the time and just like love Trump and whatever he does. So they will like be on his side no matter what. And maybe like it's like the human capital problem is not so bad when Trump is not there. So like what pressures they face within the party, like maybe the conspiracy theorists aren't like that big of a part of the coalition when Trump is gone. They just kind of disperse between the two parties because Vance is kind of lame.
That's a big lack of aura is a big problem. I'm concerned though, Richard, because like what is left of this party when Trump is gone? I'm concerned it's Groyperism and just like these vague policy things of immigration and being strong.
I think it's the model scenario. I think with Vance, Vance is committed to the post-liberal project. So I think that you would get a lot of coherence there actually, and it would be a pretty nightmare scenario. So this is why I really don't want Vance to come to power. If Vance loses, and then it's kind of going to be a free for all. I mean, it's going to be like does the old like Republican Party the way they rose up in Indiana, like those people still exist? Those people are still there, or is it just like a free for all between these crazy people? There could be a vacuum. Hopefully the Republican Party in this iteration just dies because like it's just an awful place of Groypers and conspiracy theorists, and if that doesn't work electorally, then they'll be out of power until something changes. If it works electorally, then we'll see. We'll be in a different situation.
No, I think that's right. I'm just like I don't think that there's a plan or a coherent strategy from the Republicans other than let's just do Vance in terms of the next administration. I saw a poll that showed Rubio surprisingly like gaining some momentum in polls. But I think he's announced that he wouldn't run against Vance, and I don't know that he would get the
I think
support of
he
the.
said something like that. Yeah, I think he
Yeah,
said something like that. But I think Vance is kind of the runaway favorite. I mean,
yeah,
every time, like in the last 100 years, I've looked at this, where a vice president ran after a two-term president, he's gotten the nomination. So this happened with Biden,
H.W.
even though he
Bush,
did.
Biden. Yeah,
Yeah, Al Gore. What other cases were there? There was you have to go back for two-term president. But anyways, yeah, it's been like five, six different times, and and the person has been the nominee each time. So Vance is going to start out with the favorite, probably be endorsed by Trump. He has the name recognition thing. The tech people like Elon Musk, they love him.
yeah, they love him.
The money people love him. The intelligentsia of the right, these people who I don't think highly of. Vance has done a good job of like reaching out to them, and he speaks to them. That's why he'll never denounce groypers and so forth. And so those people like him.
You see this post? They're always like the same structure. It's like, why is the media talking about this when they should be talking about
Yes.
this? And it's like this.
Yeah, and they love that. That's how every right wing like person who fancies themselves an intellectual with like 40,000 followers like talks on Twitter.
Yeah.
They're all like this. They can't defend stuff. They're always like the media. The media lied to us about this. Now we're talking about that. Why not? It's like some sort of, he's got that. He's like he's one of them. He's like one of these like mediocre substackers or Twitter posters. And so yeah, the tech people love him. The hive mind of the right loves him. He's got the name recognition. He's the vice president. It's probably going to be him. The only question is whether he's good at, I think the Groyper thing and the Bannon thing, those are the kind of the wild cards there. They could really screw with him.
Do you think their threat is overstated? Because I often think that there are people understate the potential for them to gain more prominence, the Bannonites or the Groypers, respectively. Do you think that there's that people underestimate them? I think that people underestimate.
I've always said that. Yeah, I've always said that. Like the Fuentes fans, like they pack into these TPUSA events, and they are the ones who ask the questions, and they're the ones who have the energy, and they're the ones who are in the comment section. And Bannon himself has a pretty big following and gets a lot. He's got the star power when he's talking to the media. They're paying attention more to him than other people. So yeah, that is the Bannon Groyper line.
What happened with the mic? Testing doesn't want to agree.
What mic?
No, it's me. I think it's me. My mic is shit. All right, I'm gonna check.
You're breaking it in now. Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, cool, awesome, great. Let me just make sure this is in there as well. All right. So last topic: are you going to be ready and prepared to endorse Gavin Newsom if he wins the nomination for Democratic presidency against JD Vance?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. What direction do you think the Democrats need to go to be successful in the national election? And what would it take for the Republicans to do for you to be back on their side?
They have to denounce their hatred of immigrants. I mean, I think that's probably not gonna happen. I think that's the dominant force in the party right now. And so yeah, that's that I think is kind of the main thing. Yeah, I mean, Newsom I think has the star power. I think that just like in the modern media environment, like Shapiro, I don't think has it. Like I don't think any of these other people. Gretchen Whitmer kind of has it, but you have to be kind of the people. Mamdani has it. Trump has it, obviously. You have to be the kind of person that just like you walk into the room, like people are just interested in you.
Yeah.
You have that it factor. And that's kind of the way politics is. Newsom is the person who by far AOC has it, but she's too radical and I don't think she would do well. And I don't like her policies anyway. So I think Newsom is clearly the front runner from that perspective. I think he's got some good ideas on the abundance thing. He shouts out Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson after he signs one of the big housing bills this last year. And so there's some he's kind of plugged into some of the better currents within the Democratic Party. That plus the star power, I think he's going to be formidable, and I think I'd probably prefer him at this point. But it's going to be a primary. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, last set of questions for you. We're going to get to the grade on domestic policy, and it better be an F, Richard. I mean, if this isn't enough for an F, maybe you'll give it a D or something. But a passing grade, come on. But okay, I understand that we have massive, massive problems, you and I both, with Trump's domestic policies. What is on your wish list of things that you think he still can accomplish in the next 3 years, and specifically in the next year, that you think is a realistic, like something that you would think that Trump could accomplish that you would like domestically?
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that are have been done already, but you need time to see how they work out or the implementation. So some of the stuff on nuclear regulatory commission, we've really screwed up with nuclear power in this country, but it'll take a while to see whether the fruits of what Trump has been doing are going to work out. He's done some stuff on environmental permitting. Again, we'll see how that works. It takes a while to judge these
Yeah.
policies. I think that is AI thing of like a hands off, kind of approach has been good. Um,
You're against
like I think some
Bernie's
of the
what was Bernie's proposal that
uh,
like ban data centers until we figure out what the hell's going on?
yeah, exactly, until like we solve like hunger and homelessness or something. It's kind of yeah, it's nuts.
Don't hate on my
Uh,
man. But okay, cool. So on AI stuff, you like the hands off. Do you like the hands off on crypto and fraud? We'll start with crypto
no,
and then
that's
fraud.
no. I think
It's
the fraud
insane.
thing is obviously bad.
Yeah.
It's insane. The crypto thing, I'm kind of undecided on. It's like idiots gambling and like scamming each other, and it's like whatever. Let the idiots gamble and scam each other. I
Trump
mean, it's
included
just
with
like
like one of the most fucking insane rug pulls slash crypto schemes with his Trump coin shit. I mean, that was
yeah,
an absurd situation. But no,
yeah.
I
I
agree
mean,
with you.
like it's like should it be illegal to like just tell idiots like buy this stupid Trump thing
I'm
and
not
then
sure.
take their money
Maybe
as long as
not.
you're not lying. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so like I don't care about making it illegal. I think that's probably has some bad effects. I think some of the FDA stuff, like using Bayesian statistics, is a it's very in the weeds kind of thing. But they recently announced they're going to do that. I think making a lot of people I know who are into making the drug trials work better and less expensive. They kind of like some of the stuff coming out of RFK's FDA, despite or HHS and FDA, despite the
Vaccine shit.
vaccine stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff that yeah, the stuff that RFK doesn't pay attention to. I mean, there's some smart people doing smart things there. So yeah, there's a lot that's like there's a lot that's like actually good. I mean, it is like it's like the it's like this is an authoritarian kind of regime that doesn't care about truth, that is corrupt, that declares war on parts of the country, but like still has like some good ideas because the right still is like we're the place where the most pro free market people are, and so you're gonna get like good policies thanks to that, and it's going to be complicated. It's not going to be as easy as like everything this administration did is like cursed and it just has to be uprooted root and branch.
Okay, so final grades. And if you want on domestic, you can split it up, immigration, whatever you want, or you could just give a final on domestic policy. Give us your thoughts here. Give a grade.
On the yeah, I mean on immigration, I give it an F.
Yeah.
On other domestic, like you take out foreign policy, take out immigration. On like domestic policy, um, yeah, I mean a B, the B minus. I mean, other than
Interesting.
immigration, a B. There's not a lot that they're doing domestically, other than immigration, besides being obviously corrupt and just selling the
So the
government.
corruption
Right?
authoritarianism,
That
you're trying to disentangle that from the policies that are like not sort of wrapped up in that stuff. So what you're saying is on authoritarianism and corruption, I would assume that you would say that that's like an F minus, and it's one of the most corrupt administrations you've ever
yeah,
seen. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it's an F on corruption. A lot of the policy things are a lot of policies other than that I've talked about
Yeah.
have been pretty good, and I worry about kind of the long term institutional damage, which is like another kind of do I factor that into domestic policy? I don't know. It's very complicated. I wish the leftists would just become free market people, so I don't have to deal with this shit, and I don't have to have to like what the Republicans are doing, but know that they're just kind of corrupt and out of their minds. So that's what I want to do. I want to convince left wing people that just free markets work and they should all be free market people. Then they can be good people and have the right policies, and then everything can be simple.
Well, I appreciate the candor. We have some disagreements, but I always like getting your read on what's going on. And yeah, I'm sure in like 5 or 6 months, I'll want to get your take again and see if any of these viewpoints have changed at all. But I just want to thank you most of all for coming on and chatting. It's useful to get your perspective on this issue, and it's good to see you at least fighting strongly on the corruption, on the Renee Good stuff, on the ICE stuff, and immigration stuff. It's useful, I think, to have voices who are even conservative that are on the right side of those issues. So thank you for joining me, and appreciate you. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I appreciate you too, Pisco. It was a great conversation. The Substack is the most important thing. So most of my articles are free. Some of them are paid, but just leave your email and you'll get the article. So it's richardhanania.com, or you just Google my name. It'll come up. Also on Twitter. And yeah, again, those are the places where I primarily spend my time.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard. Talk soon. All right.
All right, man. Take care.
Peace out.